In the quiet stretch of the Middle Ages, when nights were longer than most people preferred, and the world seemed to move at the pace of a slow-creaking wooden cart, the act of sleeping itself carried a peculiar rhythm that feels both familiar and strangely distant. And as we settle into this gentle beginning, it becomes easier to imagine a world illuminated not by screens or streetlights, but by the dim glow of a tallow candle bending softly with the draft of a stone room. Sleep for medieval people was far from the simple, uninterrupted experience we expect today, for their nights unfolded in segments, often beginning with what they called first sleep, a slow and heavy descent into rest that stretched over the early hours after sunset, when entire households, whether noble or peasant, drifted into a communal state of drowsy silence, broken occasionally by the sounds of animals shifting in their stalls or wind brushing against wooden shutters. And during this first sleep, people rarely remained entirely still, as their bedding was made of straw, wool, feathers, or whatever materials they could gather, and this made the night an unpredictable dance of comfort and discomfort and discomfort. After the first sleep came a curious period known as the watch, a kind of natural intermission in the darkness, when people rose gently from their pallets or mattresses to attend to quiet tasks, pray, talk in hushed voices, or simply sit awake in the dimness while their bodies rested between cycles, and shaped by the absence of artificial light, by the rhythm of dawn and dusk, and by the simple reality that the human mind settled into a different pattern when surrounded by darkness that felt complete and uninterrupted. And in this still period between sleeping phases, individuals might reflect on dreams, tend to infants, add wood to the fire, or even share quiet thoughts with family members who also found themselves awake. In rural cottages, this watch period often included tending to animals, checking on bread dough left to rise, or whispering brief prayers for protection from the unseen dangers people imagined prowling outside their thin wooden doors. While in wealthier homes, individuals might read short passages from devotional books, speak with servants, or simply stare into the flickering hearth that provided enough light to make the shadows dance against stone walls. This natural pause in the night created space for contemplation that medieval people found restful rather than strange. And once this watch ended, sometimes after an hour, sometimes longer, they eased again into what was called second sleep, a deeper, sometimes dream-rich rest that carried them gently toward the approaching dawn. This segmented pattern formed the backbone of medieval sleep habits, influencing how people approached their evenings, their spiritual practices, their privacy, and even their understanding of dreams, which they often saw as meaningful messages rather than random flickers of thought. To imagine this world is to picture long, quiet rooms, filled with the subtle scent of burning fat candles, the faint rustle of wool blankets, and the slow rhythm of breathing shared between family members who slept side by side because heat was precious, space was limited, and togetherness meant survival. In this opening chapter, the softness of medieval nights feels like a slow-moving stream of routines shaped by necessity rather than preference, by the turning of seasons, and by a deep cultural acceptance that sleep was not a single, solid block of unconsciousness, but a layered experience filled with pauses, thoughts, fears, comforts, and small tasks that slipped seamlessly into the dark hours. And as we settle into this world, we begin to notice how different their understanding of rest truly was, and how the simple lack of artificial light created a natural pattern that shaped every life. From the humblest peasant to the noblest lord awakening in his grand but cold manner, reminding us that even in the quietest corners of history, the habits of ordinary people reveal more about the rhythm of life than the loud moments ever could. And within this gentle, half-lit stretch of medieval night, we find the perfect beginning to a story built slowly for sleep, peace, and the soft unraveling of the past. As the night deepened in medieval homes, the peculiar and sometimes surprising habits surrounding sleep became increasingly apparent. For people did not approach rest in the way we modernly imagine, with hours of uninterrupted slumber and perfectly arranged mattresses, but rather with a fluid sense of timing and purpose that shaped both physical and mental life. And in this continuation of our exploration, it is essential to note that medieval people often adapted their sleeping arrangements to the limitations of their environment, their social status, and even the seasons, such that winter nights long dark and cold encouraged huddling together in shared beds or near the hearth, while summer nights, shorter and warmer, allowed for more fragmented or loosely structured sleep, sometimes even outdoors or in lofts where the air was cooler but the blankets thinner. And in towns, crowded streets and noisy neighbors sometimes interrupted rest, prompting a cultural acceptance of brief awakenings as normal rather than troublesome. A rhythm that modern observers might initially find odd, but which functioned naturally within the lived experience of medieval communities. Moreover, the furnishings themselves influenced sleep in ways both practical and symbolic. For even a simple straw mattress carried meaning, reflecting the economic status of a household and the care with which a family approached its nightly routines. And pillows, often stuffed with feathers or straw, were used not only for comfort, but also to elevate the head for spiritual or health-related reasons, as people believed that the position of the body during sleep could affect dreams or prevent illness. And while beds in wealthier homes were more elaborate, adorned with carved frames, curtains, and thick blankets, the essential function remained the same: to provide a resting space that could be shared, shifted, and adapted to the needs of the moment. And in the quiet hours between first and second sleep, it was common for people to move themselves, their children, or even small animals, adjusting positions in the dim light and speaking in whispers or not at all, embracing a flexibility that seems foreign to modern, strict schedules, yet perfectly natural in a time when nights were long, dark, and largely free from the interruptions of artificial illumination. Another curious aspect of medieval sleep, often overlooked in modern summaries, was the presence of sleep companions, not in the romantic sense alone, but as part of practical necessity. Family members, servants, apprentices, or even close friends might share beds or sleeping spaces to conserve warmth and space, with the occasional presence of pets, such as cats or small dogs, who offered warmth, companionship, or protection from pests. And such arrangements were seldom uncomfortable by contemporary standards, as the cultural perception of personal space differed and comfort was measured in the quality of sleep rather than privacy alone. Additionally, the role of superstition, religion, and ritual in sleep cannot be ignored. For many medieval people, believed that certain prayers, charms, or even small objects placed near the bed could guard against nightmares, disease, or evil spirits. And it was not unusual for a household to leave a candle burning in a specific corner, arrange herbs along windowsills, or maintain talismans near pillows, with the effect of creating a psychological sense of safety that allowed sleep to arrive more gently, despite the inherent dangers perceived in the outside world. In larger towns and cities, where social hierarchies were strict and homes compact, the patterns of sleep were similarly pragmatic, with some family members sleeping in main chambers and others relegated to lofts or side rooms, and the management of light, heat, and sound was carefully considered. Even if the methods seem crude by modern eyes, such that heavy curtains, animal skins, or even strategically placed furniture were used to block drafts or absorb noise, creating pockets of quiet necessary for rest. And this attention to detail in daily routines shows how deeply integrated sleep was with domestic life, social structures, and the rhythm of medieval work. For a well-rested family could rise early to tend fields, manage livestock, or perform other labor-intensive tasks. Finally, dreams and their interpretation formed a subtle yet important part of this nighttime existence, as people recorded, shared, or reflected upon dreams in ways that could influence decisions, caution against danger, or simply provide entertainment and reflection. And in this gentle consideration of sleep's multiple layers, physical, social, spiritual, and psychological, we begin to understand not only the strangeness, but also the calm beauty of medieval nocturnal life, where the dark hours were filled with quiet movements, whispered thoughts, occasional prayer, and the ebb and flow of wakefulness, all set against a backdrop of stone walls, wooden beams, flickering candlelight, and the comforting rhythm of human breath and warmth, illustrating a world in which the passage of night itself was a companion, a teacher, and a gentle guide into dreams that were sometimes vivid, sometimes mundane, but always intimately connected to the slow, measured, cadence of a life lived in tune with the natural cycle of light and dark. As morning light slowly crept into the narrow windows of medieval homes, the unusual but remarkably consistent sleep habits of the previous night gave way to the gentle stirrings of daily life. And in this continuation of our exploration, it becomes clear that sleep in the Middle Ages was never an isolated act but deeply embedded within the routines, beliefs, and domestic arrangements of the time. For the transition between night and day was often gradual, marked by faint glimmers of sun reflecting off stone walls, the distant crow of a rooster, and the soft, deliberate movements of household members rising from their segmented sleep, first sleep and second sleep, having shaped both body and mind for the day ahead. And the awareness of this dual sleep pattern influenced not only when people woke, but also how they approached morning rituals, as hygiene, food, preparation, and prayer often began immediately after second sleep, a practice that contrasted sharply with modern ideas of continuous night sleep punctuated by a single awakening. And in considering the start of the day, one can observe that medieval people often moved with a slow, methodical grace, carrying water from wells, tending to livestock, or arranging the household for the tasks ahead, all while still carrying traces of drowsiness, lingering dreams, or quiet reflections on the hours spent awake in the night's watch. And this rhythm, though unfamiliar to contemporary eyes, created a harmony with the environment, the cycles of light, and the demands of a labor-intensive life, fostering a natural integration of rest and wakefulness that supported physical endurance and mental clarity in a society largely governed by sunlight and seasons rather than clocks or electronic schedules. In rural areas where peasants worked fields, cared for animals, and managed subsistence households, the morning often involved gathering the family close to warm stoves or fires, sharing simple meals of bread, porridge, or cheese, and preparing for the work of the day in a manner that emphasized practicality and efficiency. Yet even here, sleep and its segmented patterns influenced social interactions, with older children or adults sometimes offering quiet care to younger siblings who had awakened midnight, maintaining the sense of communal responsibility that pervaded domestic life. And in urban centers, the awakening sequence could be even more structured, with apprentices rising early to light fires, sweep floors, and begin tasks for their masters, while merchants, craftsmen, and others followed strict routines aligned with guild requirements, market hours, and religious obligations. And throughout all of this, the lingering effects of nighttime rituals, spiritual practices, and protective measures persisted, shaping behavior and consciousness as people moved from the shadowed calm of their sleeping quarters into the activity and social demands of daytime. Interestingly, the medieval understanding of sleep and wakefulness was also intertwined with health, medicine, and superstition, as people often believed that proper alignment of sleep, periodic awakenings, and exposure to fresh air could influence physical and mental well-being. And some manuals of the period advised gentle stretching, small naps during daylight hours, or specific sleeping positions to prevent illness, while charms, prayers, and even small tokens placed near beds were thought to safeguard the sleeper's soul or body, blurring the line between practical care and spiritual concern, and making the very act of going to sleep a multi-dimensional practice that addressed physical comfort, psychological security, and moral or religious obligations simultaneously. This relationship between night and day also influenced work and leisure, as sleep was rarely uninterrupted and often punctuated by natural pauses, short conversations, or brief acts of devotion, which in turn fostered a culture of attentiveness and adaptability, as families and communities learned to respond to the unpredictable rhythms of animals, weather, neighbors, and their own internal cycles, embracing what modern historians call polyphasic sleep as a norm rather than a peculiarity. And in doing so, they created a social fabric that accounted for human variability, environmental pressures, and the demands of labor, spirituality, and domestic life, a fabric woven not in haste but in the slow, careful interweaving of night and day, wakefulness and rest, personal need and communal responsibility. In imagining these slow awakenings, one can picture candlelit rooms gradually yielding to daylight, warm hearths releasing the last embers of night fire, and the muted chatter or soft footsteps of those who rose first, while others lingered in half-consciousness, stretching under blankets, adjusting straw-filled mattresses, or murmuring short prayers. And this scene, repeated across homes, villages, and towns, reflects a civilization in which sleep habits were at once practical, symbolic, and socially significant, shaping patterns of behavior, thought, and interpersonal relationships in ways that modern observers might overlook, yet which reveal a deep attentiveness to the human need for rest, comfort, and continuity. And in contemplating these early morning hours, we begin to appreciate the slow, deliberate rhythm of medieval life, the intricate balance of night, almost hypnotic order that emerged from the union of segmented sleep, household activity, spiritual practices, and human adaptability, all of which created a world in which waking was as gentle and deliberate as the night itself, and where the strange but coherent habits of medieval sleepers provide a soothing, fascinating lens through which to view the slow passage of time and the quiet persistence of daily life. As the morning gradually unfolded into the late hours, the unusual yet methodical sleep habits of medieval people continued to influence the rhythm of the household and the surrounding community, revealing a lifestyle deeply attuned to natural cycles, domestic needs, and spiritual obligations. And as we observe this slow awakening, it is evident that daily life was choreographed not only around labor and survival, but also around the fragmented, segmented patterns of rest that structured both body and mind, creating an implicit understanding that human activity was intertwined with sleep in a continuous, flowing cycle rather than confined to strict boundaries. For children who had awakened during the watch of the night might continue to rest in intermittent naps, while adults moved quietly between tending hearths, feeding animals, drawing water, and preparing simple meals, all with a soft attentiveness that allowed the household to function smoothly without jarring interruptions. And in urban households, these rhythms were similarly guided by the demands of craft, trade, and commerce, as early risers prepared tools, cleaned workspaces, or readied wares for market, and apprentices, servants, and family members alike adjusted their own rest and activity to match the expectations of guilds, patrons, and neighbors, demonstrating a flexibility and attentiveness that modern schedules rarely require. The segmented sleep patterns also shaped social interactions, as shared periods of wakefulness during the night allowed for whispered conversations, brief storytelling, or quiet prayers, creating a nocturnal community that persisted subtly into the early morning, with bonds strengthened by shared experiences of partial sleep, warmth, and domestic responsibility. And even in the midst of labor, these nighttime awakenings were remembered and integrated into the day, informing decisions, conversations, and planning, and reinforcing a culture in which the boundary between night and day, rest and work, individual and family, was permeable, fluid, and socially meaningful, as opposed to the rigid separation often expected today. In addition to household and work patterns, spiritual practices played a defining role in shaping the early hours, as prayers, chants, or blessings recited at the bedside before final sleep often left residual mindfulness that carried into the morning. And in some religious communities, monastic or conventual routines formalized these practices with precise timing, segmented rest, and designated hours of vigil, reinforcing the rhythm of waking and sleeping as both a practical and sacred cycle. A rhythm that connected physical refreshment with spiritual preparation and moral reflection, and that underscored the medieval understanding that every hour, even in the dark or drowsy parts of the night, was invested with meaning and purpose. The sensory environment during this period was also important, as the smell of cooking bread or porridge, the faint warmth from fading embers in the hearth, and the quiet noises of domestic animals all signaled the gradual transition from night to day, allowing the household to adjust without sudden shocks, and encouraging an ease of movement and thought that mirrored the natural flexibility of segmented sleep, fostering a calm, measured approach to life that harmonized with the demands of labor, climate, and social order, and which enabled medieval people to navigate the unpredictabilities of both environment and society with subtle efficiency. Moreover, health and hygiene practices were closely integrated with these sleep and wake cycles, as early morning often included washing with cold or warm water, adjusting bedding, airing out rooms, or preparing herbs or remedies for minor ailments, with the segmented sleep pattern allowing for brief reflection on one's bodily condition and the application of small restorative practices, demonstrating an attentiveness to physical well-being that complemented both spiritual and practical concerns, and which helped maintain energy levels for the demanding physical work that dominated medieval life. Interestingly, the awareness of nighttime awakenings also informed approaches to education, instruction, and storytelling, as parents or tutors might share short lessons, recite prayers, or recount tales in soft voices during watch periods or early morning, subtly reinforcing cultural knowledge, moral lessons, or practical skills in the gentle hours between sleep cycles. And this practice, though seemingly minor, contributed to a continuous process of learning that unfolded alongside the rhythms of daily life, sleep, and labor, ensuring that knowledge was interwoven with lived experience rather than confined to formal, scheduled lessons. As the household slowly became fully active, the earlier influence of segmented sleep remained evident, reflected in the natural patience, deliberate movements, and attentiveness to environment that characterized medieval mornings, a calm that extended to fields, workshops, and town streets, tending tasks with a quiet concentration and an underlying awareness of the cyclical nature of time. And through this gentle continuity between night and day, rest and labor, privacy and communal responsibility, the medieval approach to life emerges as one of deep integration, mindfulness, and adaptability, providing modern viewers with a sense of rhythm, patience, and slow observation, and offering a calming, hypnotic perspective on a world that, while materially distant, is humanly familiar in its emphasis on the quiet, persistent patterns that sustain life. And in contemplating this blend of domestic care, spiritual attention, labor, and careful management of rest, we begin to understand how the slow unfolding of morning mirrors the deliberate, measured, and strangely comforting structure of medieval nights, forming a complete cycle that speaks to the resilience, ingenuity, and enduring humanity of people navigating their days and nights with grace, flexibility, and a profound awareness of the interdependence of sleep, activity, and life itself. By the middle of the morning, the lingering effects of segmented sleep, the nocturnal rituals, and the early hour stirrings had fully shaped the atmosphere of the medieval household, creating a rhythm that was both practical and quietly reflective. For in this period between waking and the full immersion into daily labor, people were neither completely alert nor entirely drowsy, inhabiting a gentle middle ground where thoughts, movements, and interactions flowed slowly, deliberately, and harmoniously with the natural cycles of light and warmth. And as we follow this serene progression, it becomes clear that sleep and waking were less distinct events than intertwined processes, with the habits of the night subtly guiding behavior, mood, and social engagement in ways that were culturally accepted, psychologically effective, and socially meaningful. And the influence of segmented sleep extended beyond the domestic sphere into broader community life, as neighbors, craftsmen, and town officials rose in similar patterns, creating a tacit synchrony in which commerce, labor, and social communication could begin in unison, yet with the flexibility to accommodate natural variation in rest, temperament, or readiness, reinforcing a communal understanding of time as a lived experience rather than a rigid mechanical measurement. And within homes, the sensory cues of morning, the soft glow of sunlight through narrow windows, the faint smell of cooking or hearth smoke, the quiet sounds of animals stretching or stirring, and the tactile adjustments of blankets, straw, and clothing served as subtle guides for movement, attention, and reflection, reinforcing the gentle continuity from night to day, from first sleep to second sleep to full consciousness. The domestic arrangements themselves continued to support this rhythm, with sleeping areas repurposed for quiet morning activity, meals prepared in stages to allow for gradual participation, and family members or servants attending to the household while others remained momentarily in half-sleep, embodying a communal flexibility that ensured survival, comfort, and attentiveness simultaneously. And in wealthier homes, these routines were often mirrored on a more elaborate scale, with multiple rooms, staff, and amenities, allowing for both privacy and shared awakening, and with careful management of light, heat, and sound to ensure that movement, conversation, and work could coexist peacefully, preserving the restorative function of segmented sleep while enabling early productivity, spiritual observance, and domestic order, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of human needs, long before modern sleep science provided terminology or explanation. Health and ritual practices were also closely integrated into the morning, as people used the gradual transition from night to day to wash, stretch, and prepare their bodies for labor, to recite prayers, bless the household, or inspect protective charms and talismans placed during the night, and to check on children, animals, and food supplies, blending practical care, spiritual mindfulness, and domestic responsibility into a cohesive routine, a process that reinforced both physical well-being and cultural norms, and reflected an awareness that life, work, and rest were inseparable components of a single, flowing rhythm, and that attention to detail, slow movement, and shared awareness were as essential as labor or prayer in sustaining a functioning household. Education and socialization also quietly permeated these early hours, as children observed, imitated, and sometimes participated in domestic tasks. Apprentices absorbed knowledge through observation, and family members or tutors shared lessons in soft tones, integrating the habits and rhythms of segmented sleep into a continuous process of learning, reflection, and subtle instruction, demonstrating that medieval sleep habits were not merely biological necessities, but deeply entwined with cultural, educational, and moral frameworks, influencing behavior, interaction, and cognition from night through morning, and creating a coherent pattern that connected generations, reinforced social structures, and fostered resilience and adaptability. Throughout all of this, the psychological effect of waking from segmented sleep contributed to an attentiveness and quiet mindfulness that allowed for deliberate decision-making, careful handling of labor, and a measured approach to social interaction. As people moved through the home and village with soft awareness, noting temperature, light, activity, and potential hazards, and responding with patience, caution, or cooperation as needed, and in doing so, they created a social and psychological equilibrium that enabled survival, harmony, and continuity in a world without artificial lighting, modern heating, or mechanical clocks, and which emphasized the enduring interplay between human biology, environmental cues, social structures, and cultural practices. As the morning advanced, the cumulative effect of these nocturnal and early hour habits revealed a society in which time was experienced cyclically, relationally, and practically, with segmented sleep serving not as an inconvenience, but as a mechanism to optimize alertness, spiritual engagement, physical restoration, and domestic management. A strategy born of necessity, observation, and cultural reinforcement, and one that offers a fascinating window into the subtle yet profound intelligence of medieval daily life. And in reflecting on this, we begin to understand the slow, deliberate, and comforting rhythm of medieval existence, in which night and day, sleep and activity, individual and community, spiritual and practical concerns were harmoniously integrated into a pattern that allowed human beings to rest, awaken, work, pray, and interact in a manner that was simultaneously calm, efficient, and deeply human, revealing the gentle beauty of lives lived in tune with natural cycles, shared responsibility, and the quiet persistence of everyday habits that sustained generations in ways both ordinary and extraordinary. A lesson in patience, observation, and the slow, hypnotic rhythm of life as it truly was. By the middle of the morning, the lingering effects of segmented sleep, the nocturnal rituals, and the early hour stirrings had fully shaped the atmosphere of the medieval household, creating a rhythm that was both practical and quietly reflective. For in this period between waking and the full immersion into daily labor, people were neither completely alert nor entirely drowsy, inhabiting a gentle middle ground where thoughts, movements, and interactions flowed slowly, deliberately, and harmoniously with the natural cycles of light and warmth. And as we follow this serene progression, it becomes clear that sleep and waking were less distinct events than intertwined processes, with the habits of the night subtly guiding behavior, mood, and social engagement in ways that were culturally accepted, psychologically effective, and socially meaningful. And the influence of segmented sleep extended beyond the domestic sphere into broader community life, as neighbors, craftsmen, and town officials rose in similar patterns, creating a tacit synchrony in which commerce, labor, and social communication could begin in unison, yet with the flexibility to accommodate natural variation in rest, temperament, or readiness, reinforcing a communal understanding of time as a lived experience rather than a rigid mechanical measurement. And within homes, the sensory cues of morning, the soft glow of sunlight through narrow windows, the faint smell of cooking or hearth smoke, the quiet sounds of animals stretching or stirring, and the tactile adjustments of blankets, straw, and clothing served as subtle guides for movement, attention, and reflection, reinforcing the gentle continuity from night to day, from first sleep to second sleep to full consciousness. The domestic arrangements themselves continued to support this rhythm, with sleeping areas repurposed for quiet morning activity, meals prepared in stages to allow for gradual participation, and family members or servants attending to the household while others remained momentarily in half-sleep, embodying a communal flexibility that ensured survival, comfort, and attentiveness simultaneously. And in wealthier homes, these routines were often mirrored on a more elaborate scale, with multiple rooms, staff, and amenities, allowing for both privacy and shared awakening, and with careful management of light, heat, and sound to ensure that movement, conversation, and work could coexist peacefully, preserving the restorative function of segmented sleep while enabling early productivity, spiritual observance, and domestic order, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of human needs. Long before modern sleep science provided terminology or explanation, health and ritual practices were also closely integrated into the morning, as people used the gradual transition from night to day to wash, stretch, and prepare their bodies for labor, to recite prayers, bless the household, or inspect protective charms and talismans placed during the night, and to check on children, animals, and food supplies, blending practical care, spiritual mindfulness, and domestic responsibility into a cohesive routine, a process that reinforced both physical well-being and cultural norms, and reflected an awareness that life, work, and rest were inseparable components of a single, flowing rhythm, and that attention to detail, slow movement, and shared awareness were as essential as labor or prayer in sustaining a functioning household. Education and socialization also quietly permeated these early hours, as children observed, imitated, and sometimes participated in domestic tasks. Apprentices absorbed knowledge through observation, and family members or tutors shared lessons in soft tones, integrating the habits and rhythms of segmented sleep into a continuous process of learning, reflection, and subtle instruction, demonstrating that medieval sleep habits were not merely biological necessities, but deeply entwined with cultural, educational, and moral frameworks, influencing behavior, interaction, and cognition from night through morning, and creating a coherent pattern that connected generations, reinforced social structures, and fostered resilience and adaptability. Throughout all of this, the psychological effect of waking from segmented sleep contributed to an attentiveness and quiet mindfulness that allowed for deliberate decision-making, careful handling of labor, and a measured approach to social interaction. As people moved through the home and village with soft awareness, noting temperature, light, activity, and potential hazards, and responding with patience, caution, or cooperation as needed, and in doing so, they created a social and psychological equilibrium that enabled survival, harmony, and continuity in a world without artificial lighting, modern heating, or mechanical clocks, and which emphasized the enduring interplay between human biology, environmental cues, social structures, and cultural practices. As the morning advanced, the cumulative effect of these nocturnal and early hour habits revealed a society in which time was experienced relationally and practically, with segmented sleep serving not as an inconvenience, but as a mechanism to optimize alertness, spiritual engagement, physical restoration, and domestic management, a strategy born of necessity, observation, and cultural reinforcement, and one that offers a fascinating window into the subtle yet profound intelligence of medieval daily life. And in reflecting on this, we begin to understand the slow, deliberate, and comforting rhythm of medieval existence, in which night and day, sleep and activity, individual and community, spiritual and practical concerns were harmoniously integrated into a pattern that allowed human beings to rest, awaken, work, pray, and interact in a manner that was simultaneously calm, efficient, and deeply human, revealing the gentle beauty of lives lived in tune with natural cycles, shared responsibility, and the quiet persistence of everyday habits that sustained generations in ways both ordinary and extraordinary, a lesson in patience, observation, and the slow, hypnotic rhythm of life as it truly was. As the day progressed and the medieval household moved fully into its routines, the influence of the previous night's segmented sleep continued to ripple through the minds, bodies, and interactions of those within the home. And it is here, in the quiet, methodical unfolding of daytime activity, that we begin to observe some of the more peculiar but practical habits that governed rest, wakefulness, and work in the Middle Ages, for sleep was not a discrete event confined to the night, but a fluid, integrated component of daily life, with small naps, dozing periods, and moments of quiet reflection punctuating labor, prayer, and social interactions. And these intermittent rests were considered both normal and beneficial, enhancing alertness, productivity, and even spiritual mindfulness in ways that modern rigid schedules often overlook. In farmsteads, for instance, peasants would occasionally pause during labor-intensive tasks to rest briefly in the shade of a tree, beside a barn, or within the cool shelter of their homes, their bodies still responding to the natural rhythms established during nighttime sleep. While in townhomes and workshops, artisans, apprentices, and merchants similarly recognized the value of short rests between work cycles, understanding that such intervals contributed to both efficiency and health, and that the segmented nature of sleep carried over into conscious life, creating a culture in which the ebb and flow of energy, attention, and social engagement followed a slow, deliberate rhythm that integrated body, mind, and environment. In considering these patterns, one must also acknowledge the spatial arrangements of medieval dwellings, where sleeping areas often doubled as workspaces or communal zones, and where individuals moved fluidly between rest, activity, and observation, adjusting bedding, blankets, or cushions throughout the day to accommodate temporary relaxation, social visits, or domestic chores, a practice that might seem unusual to modern viewers yet, which reflected a sophisticated understanding of human needs, comfort, and efficiency. and a remarkable adaptability to the limitations of space, resources, and social expectations. And within this context, we begin to understand the subtle interplay of sleep, work, and domestic management that defined life, shaping both behavior and perception in quiet, almost hypnotic ways. Further, medieval individuals often used sensory cues to regulate these intermittent rests, noticing light, temperature, sounds of animals, or the quiet movements of neighbors, adjusting their own attention and energy in response to these signals, and incorporating small pauses, stretches, or short prayers as a form of restorative practice, blending physical, mental, and spiritual care into everyday life, and illustrating a holistic approach to human rhythms that modern societies rarely replicate. Spiritual and ritualistic elements remained deeply embedded in these habits, as the early, middle, and late periods of rest, both nocturnal and daytime, were punctuated by prayers, blessings, and talismanic practices that reassured the sleeper, focused attention, and reinforced social and religious norms, ensuring that even in moments of drowsiness, individuals remained aligned with moral expectations, communal life, and cosmic order, and that the very act of resting, dozing, or briefly withdrawing from activity was never entirely private or disconnected from cultural and spiritual frameworks. One particularly interesting aspect of medieval sleep habits, evident in both peasants and nobility, was the preparation for night before any daytime rest, as individuals often arranged bedding, blankets, or pillows, lit small fires or candles for comfort, and occasionally moved small pets or tools to accommodate shifts in position or temperature, demonstrating an attentiveness to detail and a recognition of the importance of comfort, warmth, and safety, a practice that simultaneously addressed physical, psychological, and social needs, and which created a slow, deliberate, and almost meditative relationship with one's own body, environment, and community. In wealthier households, these habits could be more elaborate, with servants assisting in the careful adjustment of bedding, the lighting of candles or lamps, and the provision of warm drinks or small meals during brief rest periods. While in monastic settings, similar practices were integrated into highly structured routines of work, study, and prayer, where segmented sleep and short daytime rests were woven into an overarching rhythm of discipline, mindfulness, and spiritual observance, demonstrating that across social strata, sleep was never merely a passive biological necessity, but a culturally and spiritually significant practice that shaped thought, behavior, and social interaction, and that contributed to both individual well-being and the harmonious functioning of households, communities, and religious institutions. Throughout these daytime awakenings and rests, sensory perception, attention, and awareness remained attuned to subtle environmental cues, such as the soft glow of sunlight through small windows, the rustle of straw under shifting weight, the distant sounds of animals or neighboring households, and the faint scent of cooking or burning herbs, all of which guided movement, social interaction, and personal comfort in ways that made activity calm, deliberate, and contextually aware, and which reinforced the rhythm established by nighttime sleep, illustrating the continuous, interconnected cycle of rest, wakefulness, and communal engagement that defined medieval life. In contemplating these layered habits, modern viewers may notice the extraordinary attention to small details, the gentle integration of physical comfort, social awareness, and spiritual mindfulness, and the quiet, methodical patterns that governed both night and day, revealing a culture that valued patience, observation, adaptability, and the subtle management of human energy, demonstrating that even in a world lacking modern conveniences, people cultivated sophisticated strategies for well-being, attention, and social cohesion, and that sleep, segmented and integrated into all aspects of life, served as a quiet but profound structuring force, shaping everything from domestic activity to labor, social relations, and spiritual practice, ultimately creating a slow, deliberate, and soothing rhythm of life that continues to fascinate, calm, and inspire modern observers as we imagine the soft, measured, and oddly comforting patterns of medieval days and nights. As the midday hours unfolded in medieval villages and towns, the subtle influence of segmented sleep and intermittent rest became increasingly evident in the rhythm of life, shaping the way individuals approached labor, social interaction, and even meals. For the medieval day was not governed solely by rigid schedules or mechanical timekeeping, but rather by a fluid understanding of human energy, natural light, and domestic needs. A framework in which the after-effects of first and second sleep informed attentiveness, movement, and decision-making in ways both practical and psychologically soothing. And in observing this, we can begin to appreciate the extraordinary adaptability and mindfulness that characterized daily life, as people seamlessly transitioned between activity and short pauses, prayer and labor, observation and action, all within a communal and spatially shared environment that encouraged harmony, awareness, and gentle order. And the habitual movement between rest and work was further guided by sensory cues, from the warmth of the sun streaming through small windows to the faint smells of cooking or burning herbs, from the rhythmic sounds of tools and animals to the subtle temperature changes that signaled a need for protective layers or adjustment of bedding or seating, all of which informed the pace, focus, and comfort of the household, workshop, or field. In rural settings, peasants continued their labor with a quiet attentiveness, carrying small comforts from the night into the day, adjusting seating, straw mats, or cushions during brief rests, whispering prayers for protection, reflecting on dreams from the night, and sometimes pausing to observe or attend to children and animals, all of which maintained a seamless integration of personal well-being, familial care, and practical necessity, while simultaneously reinforcing a culturally normative understanding of the ebb and flow of human energy and attention. A rhythm that encouraged both productivity and resilience in a labor-intensive environment. In urban households and workshops, artisans, apprentices, and merchants mirrored this approach, strategically placing short rests between periods of work, conversation, or preparation of goods, understanding intuitively that these brief pauses maintained focus, preserved alertness, and prevented fatigue, while also providing natural opportunities for quiet reflection, storytelling, or sharing small cultural lessons. A subtle education that wove itself into the fabric of daily life, and which was made possible by the acceptance and normalization of segmented sleep. polyphasic rest, and flexible attention, creating a culture that valued mindfulness, observation, and careful management of human energy. Across all social strata, spiritual and ritualistic practices remained intertwined with daily life, as brief pauses in work or activity often provided time for prayer, reflection, or adjustment of protective talismans, ensuring that even in moments of drowsiness or minor rest, individuals remained aligned with moral, cultural, and religious expectations, reinforcing both social cohesion and psychological security, and allowing rest and spiritual mindfulness to coexist seamlessly, a practice that modern perspectives may find remarkable, given the often rigid separation between activity and rest in contemporary life, and which demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of human needs, adaptability, and cultural integration. Meals, too, were influenced by this rhythm, as breakfast or midday sustenance often occurred during or immediately following short periods of rest, with family members or workshop companions sharing simple foods, warming themselves by fire, and preparing mentally for continued activity, while the lingering effects of nocturnal and daytime sleep provided both physical rejuvenation and subtle emotional steadiness, enabling people to navigate social interactions, labor, and environmental demands with patience, care, and attentiveness. And this integration of sleep, food, work, and social coordination illustrates a society in which human energy was carefully observed, guided, and harmonized with the natural world, domestic structures, and social expectations, creating a seamless rhythm of life that was both practical and calming, measured and flexible. Additionally, the interplay of segmented sleep, short daytime rests, and attentiveness to environmental cues fostered a sense of temporal awareness that was slow, deliberate, and deeply connected to the lived experience of the body and community, rather than abstract or externally imposed, allowing medieval people to maintain mental clarity, social harmony, and physical endurance, even in the absence of modern conveniences, clocks, or artificial lighting, and emphasizing a holistic approach to daily life. Observation and action were continuously intertwined, mutually reinforcing and carefully moderated. As afternoon approached, these cumulative practices of rest, observation, and gentle activity created a measured, almost hypnotic tempo that carried individuals smoothly from midday toward the evening, preserving alertness and calm while preparing them for the return of night, segmented sleep, and domestic and spiritual rituals. And in this way, the medieval day reveals itself as an integrated cycle of work, reflection, rest, and mindful attention, offering modern viewers not only a glimpse into historical practices, but also a soothing, contemplative framework for understanding the slow, deliberate, and humanly comforting patterns of life as they were actually lived, in which every movement, pause, and observation is quietly connected to both body and mind, and to the broader rhythms of family, community, and nature. As the afternoon slowly gave way to the early evening hours, the cumulative effects of segmented sleep, daytime pauses, and mindful attention continued to shape the rhythm of medieval life, for by this point in the day, individuals had experienced the lingering influence of first and second sleep, intermittent rest periods, morning rituals, and work-related activity, creating a tempo that was simultaneously relaxed, deliberate, and attentive. And it is here, in the quiet unfolding of late-day routines, that we can truly appreciate the intricate, interconnected patterns of behavior that defined medieval daily life, where rest and work, observation and action, domestic responsibility and spiritual mindfulness flowed together in a continuous, carefully balanced rhythm, and where the awareness of bodily energy, environmental cues, and communal obligations guided every movement, decision, and interaction, forming a network of subtle, adaptive practices that allowed humans to navigate the demands of labor, social coordination, and personal well-being with calm efficiency. Within the home, this late afternoon period often involved the gentle winding down of labor, the preparation of the evening meal, and the adjustment of sleeping spaces for the approaching night. As family members tidied straw beds, spread blankets, and arranged pillows or cushions to accommodate the first sleep that would soon follow, while pets, children, and domestic animals were tended to quietly, reinforcing both comfort and vigilance, and ensuring that the transition from active work to rest would be smooth, gradual, and psychologically comforting, a practice that reflects a remarkable understanding of human rhythm, environmental adaptation, and the integration of practical and cultural knowledge, even in the absence of formal scientific frameworks. In rural households, farmers and peasants might pause briefly to observe the changing light, reflect on tasks completed, and coordinate evening routines such as milking animals, preparing fodder, or fetching water, all while maintaining a quiet attentiveness to the physical and social environment. And these pauses often served the dual purpose of conserving energy and reinforcing communal awareness. As members of the household communicated subtly, shared observations, or silently synchronized their movements, creating a cohesive, low-intensity flow of activity that minimized conflict, maximized efficiency, and allowed the mind to gradually shift toward rest. In urban contexts, similar practices occurred in workshops, inns, and townhomes, where artisans, merchants, and apprentices adjusted their activity in accordance with light, energy levels, and domestic schedules, often using short pauses to organize tools, clean surfaces, or offer brief advice or instruction, integrating periods of reflection and minor rest into labor, socialization, and preparation for evening meals and night routines, reflecting a culture in which segmented sleep, flexible attention, and mindful awareness were normalized, functional, and socially meaningful. Spiritual practices continued to be closely intertwined with these routines, as brief prayers, blessings, or inspection of protective charms punctuated lay-day activity. And as the household transitioned from the labor of the afternoon to the calm of evening, the preparation for nocturnal rituals, including first sleep, nighttime watch, and eventual second sleepwise, carried out with deliberate care, attention to sensory detail, and awareness of both personal and communal well-being, reinforcing a continuity of experience between night, day, labor, and rest, and emphasizing the integration of spiritual mindfulness with practical domestic management. In addition, sensory cues, such as the shifting warmth of the sun, the smell of cooking fires, the soft sounds of animals or neighbors, and the feel of worn straw and blankets remained central to guiding movement, comfort and psychological ease, enabling individuals to anticipate the rhythm of night and to prepare both body and mind for rest, demonstrating an intricate, almost meditative engagement with the immediate environment and a sophisticated, adaptive approach to human energy management, awareness, and communal life. As evening approached, the household gradually slowed, shadows lengthened, and candlelight or hearth embers provided gentle illumination, signaling the approach of first sleep and the nighttime watch. And all of the preceding practices: segmented sleep, daytime rests, attentive observation, spiritual mindfulness, and careful management of domestic space coalesced to create a smooth, almost hypnotic transition into nocturnal life, ensuring that rest would be restorative, that social and spiritual obligations would continue, and that the household remained attuned to both natural cycles and human needs. A rhythm that combined the practical with the cultural, the physical with the spiritual, and the individual with the communal, producing a pattern of life that was slow, deliberate, comforting, and deeply human. In reflecting on this late afternoon period, we can observe that the medieval day was not a series of rigid compartments, but a flowing continuum in which sleep, work, social interaction, and reflection were seamlessly intertwined, forming an elegant, resilient system that optimized well-being, attentiveness, and cohesion, and which allowed people to live fully in harmony with the natural world, domestic responsibilities, and social structures, demonstrating that even in a world without modern conveniences, clocks, or artificial lighting, humans cultivated sophisticated, deliberate, and calming strategies for managing energy, maintaining health, and nurturing social and spiritual life, and that these slow, methodical patterns of movement, rest, and awareness created a quietly beautiful rhythm that continues to fascinate and soothe modern observers as we imagine the measured, comforting, and hypnotic unfolding of medieval life across the full spectrum of day and night. As evening deepened into the quiet hours that signaled the approach of night, the peculiar yet surprisingly methodical habits of medieval sleep and wakefulness became the central rhythm around which households organized themselves. For at this time, the preparation for first sleep, the initial segment of nocturnal rest, was not a rushed or purely functional process, but a carefully orchestrated routine blending domestic management, social interaction, spiritual mindfulness, and attentiveness to environmental cues. And it is here that we observe the true depth of medieval engagement with the slow, deliberate unfolding of daily life, where every movement, every adjustment of bedding, every whispered conversation, and every flickering candle played a role in creating a calm, soothing, and protective atmosphere conducive to rest. Within homes, the arrangement of straw mattresses, feather pillows, blankets, and quilts was approached with care and precision, reflecting both practical needs for warmth and comfort and a culturally informed understanding of proper order, hierarchy, and social harmony as family members positioned themselves to conserve heat, maintain proximity to children or elderly relatives, or accommodate household pets whose presence offered both warmth and companionship. And in wealthier households, servants assisted in adjusting curtains, lighting hearths, and ensuring that the rooms were free from drafts or disruptive noise, creating a serene environment that encouraged smooth transition into sleep. demonstrating an awareness of physical comfort, psychological reassurance, and social cohesion that is remarkable in its subtlety and consistency. The influence of segmented sleep extended into these hours, as first sleep was often followed by a period of wakefulness in the middle of the night. But preparation for this nocturnal watch began with careful attention to evening routines, including tending fires, organizing tools or personal items, performing basic hygiene practices, and offering short prayers or blessings, all of which served to calm the mind, organize the household, and reinforce a sense of safety and well-being. And this blend of preparation, observation, and ritual was both practical and symbolic, emphasizing that sleep in medieval life was never merely a biological necessity, but a complex, culturally informed, and spiritually meaningful practice integrated into domestic and communal life. Sensory experience played a central role in shaping the atmosphere of the evening, as the flicker of candles and hearth embers cast gentle shadows on wooden beams and stone walls. The smell of burning tallow and cooked meals lingered in the air, and the distant sounds of animals, neighbors, or the natural environment served as subtle cues that guided movement, attention, and the pacing of activity, reinforcing the awareness of night as both a protective and slightly unpredictable domain, and fostering a quiet attentiveness that allowed household members to respond to minor disruptions, adjust bedding, or shift position with minimal disturbance to others, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of human behavior, environmental awareness, and social cohesion that was seamlessly embedded in domestic routine. Spiritual and ritualistic elements continued to be deeply intertwined with evening habits, as short prayers, blessings, and charms were used not only to guard against supernatural threats, but also to cultivate a sense of psychological calm and reassurance, ensuring that the household entered first sleep with a prepared mind and a sense of continuity, and reinforcing a cultural understanding that sleep was a bridge between the physical and spiritual dimensions of life, a time in which reflection, protection, and care coexisted with the practical demands of warmth, comfort, and domestic order, creating an environment simultaneously secure, restorative, and morally aligned. Within the broader social context, the quiet rhythms of evening also influenced communal life, as neighbors, villagers, and townspeople similarly prepared for night, tending to animals, securing doors, arranging personal spaces, and performing brief devotions, establishing a shared understanding of nocturnal cycles that subtly synchronized households and individuals across villages, towns, and regions, reinforcing the predictability and harmony of daily life, and offering an almost hypnotic sense of interconnectedness, patience, and calm. The late evening also allowed for reflection, storytelling, or quiet communication between family members, apprentices, or servants, taking advantage of the flexibility of segmented sleep and short nighttime awakenings to foster bonds, convey information, or impart lessons in gentle, measured ways, a practice that further integrated cultural transmission, education, and social cohesion into the rhythm of rest, illustrating how deeply woven the habits of sleep were into every facet of life, and how even minor adjustments, whispered words, or small movements carried significance in both practical and psychological terms. Finally, as the household settled fully into first sleep, the careful orchestration of environment, routine, spiritual practice, and social harmony produced a slow, deliberate, and comforting tempo that guided individuals, illustrating the calm beauty of medieval nocturnal life, where the night was neither feared nor hurried through, but embraced as a period of reflection, recuperation, and gentle continuity, a period in which human energy, domestic care, and spiritual mindfulness converged to create a rhythm both soothing and functional, and one that allows modern viewers to imagine, almost palpably, the hypnotic and calming patterns of life as they were truly lived in a time before artificial illumination, modern heating, or mechanical timekeeping, revealing the quiet, measured, and profoundly human logic of medieval sleep habits. As the night deepened and households gradually settled into the quiet embrace of first sleep, the subtle but persistent influence of segmented sleep, domestic routines, and spiritual mindfulness continued to shape both behavior and perception. For medieval sleep was not merely an interval of unconsciousness, but an active, culturally informed process in which awareness, social bonds, and environmental adaptation coexisted with rest. And in this period, we can observe the interplay of these factors in the way individuals prepared for, experienced, and occasionally broke from the initial slumber, moving with deliberate caution to avoid disturbing others, maintaining warmth through shared bedding or the presence of small animals, and performing minor rituals that reinforced both psychological comfort and spiritual security, all of which created a nocturnal environment that was simultaneously practical, restorative, and quietly reflective, and which exemplified the sophisticated understanding medieval people had of their own bodies, minds, and communities. In rural cottages, peasants might awaken briefly during the night to check on animals, adjust fires or blankets, or attend to the needs of children, a practice normalized by cultural acceptance of second sleep and a flexible understanding of rest. While in urban homes and workshops, similar nocturnal awakenings occurred for reasons ranging from security, household management, or the tending of craft materials, reflecting a shared recognition that the night was a time of vigilance as well as repose, and that periods of wakefulness could be seamlessly integrated into the larger rhythm of daily life, enhancing both practical functionality and psychological balance, and reinforcing the communal and familial cohesion necessary for survival in an unpredictable world. Sensory cues remained crucial in guiding these nighttime habits. As the faint glow of embers, the subtle sounds of animals, the movement of other household members, and the shifting temperature of the room all informed decisions, movements, and awareness, allowing individuals to navigate the night without unnecessary disturbance or risk, and encouraging a calm, deliberate approach to activity that minimized stress and maximized both comfort and attention, demonstrating a nuanced, almost meditative engagement with the environment that modern observers may find striking, given contemporary tendencies toward artificial lighting, rigid sleep schedules, and continuous, uninterrupted nighttime rest. Spiritual rituals, prayers, and protective charms continued to play a central role in nocturnal life, as brief awakenings often included whispered invocations, silent reflection, or small adjustments of protective items placed around the sleeping area, reinforcing a sense of safety, cultural alignment, and spiritual continuity, and ensuring that even moments of partial wakefulness were framed by meaning, reassurance, and order, a practice that blurred the lines between rest, reflection, and cultural participation, and that allowed sleep to serve not only biological but psychological, social, and moral functions. Interestingly, the flexible and segmented nature of sleep also facilitated forms of nocturnal socialization and informal education, as family members, apprentices, or servants might share stories, provide brief instructions, or exchange small observations during these quiet periods, reinforcing bonds, transmitting knowledge, and maintaining cohesion without disturbing the restorative function of rest, illustrating a sophisticated integration of human needs, communal coordination, and cultural transmission, and revealing how even the most ordinary acts of nighttime life were imbued with layered purpose, intention, and subtle social meaning. The physical environment itself, strapped mattresses, feather pillows, quilts and blankets, hearths and candles, narrow windows, and carefully arranged furnishings supported these rhythms by providing warmth, comfort, and sensory stability, allowing people to awaken briefly and return to sleep without undue disruption, and demonstrating a deep, culturally embedded understanding of how material conditions and human behavior coalesce to optimize both rest and attentiveness, a practical wisdom honed over generations. Moreover, the awareness of polyphasic or segmented sleep encouraged a psychological adaptability that permeated daily life, fostering patience, attentiveness, and resilience, as individuals were accustomed to responding to subtle cues, minor disruptions, or household needs with calm, measured actions rather than anxiety or abruptness, creating a sense of quiet mastery over one's body, environment, and social responsibilities, and reinforcing the notion that life itself was a slow, deliberate, and interconnected rhythm in which rest and activity, reflection and labor, private needs and communal obligations were harmoniously intertwined. As the night progressed toward the middle watch and the eventual transition into second sleep, these habits collectively formed a complex, comforting, and highly functional nocturnal routine, one that allowed households to navigate darkness with both practical efficiency and psychological ease, blending care, attentiveness, observation, spiritual practice, and domestic management, and demonstrating that medieval people understood sleep not simply as an isolated biological function, culturally and environmentally embedded practice, in which the slow unfolding of night, the flexibility of segmented rest, and the careful orchestration of domestic space and human behavior created a nocturnal environment that was at once restorative, calming, and profoundly human. In contemplating these patterns, modern viewers can appreciate not only the strangeness but also the subtle beauty of medieval sleep habits, the hypnotic, soothing rhythm of the night, and the elegant integration of mind, body, community, an environment that defined daily life, offering a rare and calming window into the ordinary yet extraordinary logic of existence in a world without modern conveniences, artificial lighting, or rigid schedules, and reminding us that rest, attention, and cultural practice can coexist in a measured, harmonious, and profoundly comforting pattern that endures across centuries, quietly inviting reflection, calm observation, and the gentle appreciation of life's slow, deliberate rhythms as they were truly lived in the Middle Ages. As the night deepened and households gradually settled into the quiet embrace of first sleep, the subtle but persistent influence of segmented sleep, domestic routines, and spiritual mindfulness continued to shape both behavior and perception. For medieval sleep was not merely an interval of unconsciousness, but an active, culturally informed process in which awareness, social bonds, and environmental adaptation coexisted with rest. And in this period, we can observe the interplay of these factors in the way individuals prepared for, experienced, and occasionally broke from the initial slumber, moving with deliberate caution to avoid disturbing others, maintaining warmth through shared bedding or the presence of small animals, and performing minor rituals that reinforced both psychological comfort and spiritual security, all of which created a nocturnal environment that was simultaneously practical, restorative, and quietly reflective, and which exemplified the sophisticated understanding medieval people had of their own bodies, minds, and communities. In rural cottages, peasants might awaken briefly during the night to check on animals, adjust fires or blankets, or attend to the needs of children, a practice normalized by cultural acceptance of second sleep and a flexible understanding of rest. While in urban homes and workshops, similar nocturnal awakenings occurred for reasons ranging from security, household management, or the tending of craft materials, reflecting a shared recognition that the night was a time of vigilance as well as repose, and that periods of wakefulness could be seamlessly integrated into the larger rhythm of daily life, enhancing both practical functionality and psychological balance, and reinforcing the communal and familial cohesion necessary for survival in an unpredictable world. Sensory cues remained crucial in guiding these nighttime habits. As the faint glow of embers, the subtle sounds of animals, the movement of other household members, and the shifting temperature of the room all informed decisions, movements, and awareness, allowing individuals to navigate the night without unnecessary disturbance or risk, and encouraging a calm, deliberate approach to activity that minimized stress and maximized both comfort and attention, demonstrating a nuanced, almost meditative engagement with the environment that modern observers may find striking, given contemporary tendencies toward artificial lighting, rigid sleep schedules, and continuous, uninterrupted nighttime rest. Spiritual rituals, prayers, and protective charms continued to play a central role in nocturnal life, as brief awakenings often included whispered invocations, silent reflection, or small adjustments of protective items placed around the sleeping area, reinforcing a sense of safety, cultural alignment, and spiritual continuity, and ensuring that even moments of partial wakefulness were framed by meaning, reassurance, and order, a practice that blurred the lines between rest, reflection, and cultural participation, and that allowed sleep to serve not only biological but psychological, social, and moral functions. Interestingly, the flexible and segmented nature of sleep also facilitated forms of nocturnal socialization and informal education, as family members, apprentices, or servants might share stories, provide brief instructions, or exchange small observations during these quiet periods, reinforcing bonds, transmitting knowledge, and maintaining cohesion without disturbing the restorative function of rest, illustrating a sophisticated integration of human needs, communal coordination, and cultural transmission, and revealing how even the most ordinary acts of nighttime life were imbued with layered purpose, intention, and subtle social meaning. The physical environment itself, strapped mattresses, feather pillows, quilts and blankets, hearths and candles, narrow windows, and carefully arranged furnishings supported these rhythms by providing warmth, comfort, and sensory stability, allowing people to awaken briefly and return to sleep without undue disruption, and demonstrating a deep, culturally embedded understanding of how material conditions and human behavior coalesce to optimize both rest and attentiveness, a practical wisdom honed over generations. Moreover, the awareness of polyphasic or segmented sleep encouraged a psychological adaptability that permeated daily life, fostering patience, attentiveness, and resilience, as individuals were accustomed to responding to subtle cues, minor disruptions, or household needs with calm, measured actions rather than anxiety or abruptness, creating a sense of quiet mastery over one's body, environment, and social responsibilities, and reinforcing the notion that life itself was a slow, deliberate, and interconnected rhythm in which rest and activity, reflection and labor, private needs and communal obligations were harmoniously intertwined. As the night progressed toward the middle watch and the eventual transition into second sleep, these habits collectively formed a complex, comforting, and highly functional nocturnal routine, one that allowed households to navigate darkness with both practical efficiency and psychological ease, blending care, attentiveness, observation, spiritual practice, and domestic management, and demonstrating that medieval people understood sleep not simply as an isolated biological function, culturally and environmentally embedded practice, in which the slow unfolding of night, the flexibility of segmented rest, and the careful orchestration of domestic space and human behavior created a nocturnal environment that was at once restorative, calming, and profoundly human. In contemplating these patterns, modern viewers can appreciate not only the strangeness but also the subtle beauty of medieval sleep habits, the hypnotic, soothing rhythm of the night, and the elegant integration of mind, body, community, an environment that defined daily life, offering a rare and calming window into the ordinary yet extraordinary logic of existence in a world without modern conveniences, artificial lighting, or rigid schedules, and reminding us that rest, attention, and cultural practice can coexist in a measured, harmonious, and profoundly comforting pattern that endures across centuries, quietly inviting reflection, calm observation, and the gentle appreciation of life's slow, deliberate rhythms as they were truly lived in the Middle Ages. As the night deepened and households fully embraced the rhythm of first sleep, the quiet, deliberate patterns of medieval life became increasingly apparent, reflecting a culture in which segmented sleep, intermittent wakefulness, and attentive domestic and spiritual practices were woven seamlessly into daily life. For during these nocturnal hours, people navigated a world of half-light, flickering candle flames, and glowing hearth embers, moving with slow, measured steps to adjust bedding, check on children or animals, and perform minor domestic tasks without disturbing the restorative flow of sleep. And this careful orchestration of movement, sound, and light reveals a remarkable sensitivity to human needs, environmental conditions, and communal living, illustrating a level of attentiveness and mindfulness that is rarely found in modern routines dominated by artificial illumination, rigid schedules, and uninterrupted nighttime rest. The nocturnal habits of the medieval household were simultaneously practicable, cultural, and spiritual, as brief awakenings often involved quiet prayers, inspection of protective charms, and small gestures of care for family members, all of which reinforced psychological comfort, spiritual mindfulness, and social cohesion, demonstrating that sleep was not merely a biological necessity, but a socially, culturally, and spiritually embedded practice, and that each night was a continuum of activity, reflection, and rest, a rhythm that nurtured resilience, attentiveness, and emotional balance across the household and in communities at large. Similar practices created a tacit synchrony of nocturnal vigilance and rest, as neighbors and fellow villagers adjusted to night with comparable care, awareness, and attentiveness, fostering subtle cohesion and shared cultural understanding across domestic and social spheres. Sensory cues played a central role in guiding nocturnal behavior, from the subtle warmth of embers and the soft scent of burning tallow to the distant sounds of animals, the rustle of straw, and the faint movement of other household members, all of which informed decisions, actions, and awareness, allowing people to awaken briefly, adjust their environment, or perform minor tasks without disturbing others, demonstrating a profound understanding of the interplay between human biology, spatial organization, and environmental stimuli, and revealing the sophisticated and adaptive strategies that medieval people employed to navigate darkness with calm, deliberation, and efficiency. These nocturnal practices were further enriched by the cultural and ritual frameworks that surrounded them, as prayers, blessings, and protective talismans were seamlessly integrated into the rhythm of sleep, providing reassurance, moral alignment, and spiritual continuity, while simultaneously guiding behavior, attention, and movement, and reinforcing social and familial bonds. A reminder that medieval sleep was never entirely private or isolated, but deeply interconnected with community, culture, and belief systems, and that each night represented a microcosm of human care, attentiveness, and cooperation. The segmented nature of sleep also allowed for brief periods of socialization, reflection, or instruction during nocturnal awakenings, as family members, servants, or apprentices quietly exchanged advice, shared stories, or imparted small lessons, blending practical, educational, and cultural transmission into the quiet rhythm of the night, a practice that subtly reinforced social cohesion and the continuity of knowledge across generations, and which exemplifies the multi-layered function of sleep in medieval life as simultaneously restorative, educational, and socially meaningful. Material arrangements of the household straw mattresses, quilts, blankets, cushions, pets, and carefully arranged furnishings supported these practices, ensuring comfort, warmth, and sensory stability, and allowing brief awakenings or minor nocturnal tasks to occur without disruption. demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of how physical environment and human behavior can be harmonized to optimize both rest and attentiveness. A practical wisdom that underscores the slow, deliberate, and human-centered design of medieval domestic life. Psychologically, the awareness of polyphasic or segmented sleep fostered resilience, patience, and adaptability as individuals became accustomed to responding to environmental cues. Minor disruptions and household needs with measured, deliberate action rather than abrupt or anxious responses, creating a calm, steady rhythm that governed both night and day, sleep and activity, reflection and labor, private and communal obligations, and reinforcing the notion that medieval life was characterized by a continuous, interconnected tempo in which every movement, pause, and observation had meaning, purpose, and subtle impact. As the night wore on and households transitioned toward the middle watch period and eventual second sleep, these habits collectively formed a cohesive, comforting, and highly functional nocturnal routine, demonstrating that medieval people had developed an integrated approach to life in which the practical, spiritual, social, and psychological dimensions of sleep were carefully balanced and harmonized, producing a rhythm of night that was restorative, gentle, and profoundly human, and offering modern observers a window into a world in which the slow, measured, and deliberate unfolding of daily and nightly life provided both structure and comfort, efficiency and calm, and an enduring sense of harmony between human behavior, domestic space, and natural cycles, ultimately revealing the hypnotic, soothing, and quietly beautiful patterns that governed life in the Middle Ages and offering timeless lessons in patience, observation, and the gentle art of living in tune with both self and environment. As the final chapter of the day and night cycle unfolded, the interplay of segmented sleep, careful domestic management, and deeply ingrained cultural habits reached its full expression. For in medieval life, the night was not merely a time of unconscious rest, but a carefully orchestrated sequence of alertness, reflection, domestic adjustment, and spiritual observance. A period in which human attention, social cohesion, and environmental awareness converged in ways that modern observers might find surprisingly sophisticated and calming. And as households transitioned from first sleep toward middle watch awakenings and the eventual second sleep, the quiet rhythms established throughout the day guided every movement, gesture, and thought, producing a continuity of experience that linked work, rest, domestic care, and spiritual mindfulness into an integrated temporal flow, a rhythm that was simultaneously restorative, socially cohesive, and psychologically stabilizing, and which offers a hypnotic window into the deliberate pacing of medieval existence. Within homes, first sleep often ended in the middle of the night, not abruptly but gently, as individuals gradually stirred, adjusted their bedding, tended to children or animals, and sometimes performed minor household or craft tasks, all while maintaining a quiet attentiveness to avoid disturbing others, demonstrating a culture in which nocturnal activity was normalized, expected, and carefully integrated into daily life, and where the segmented nature of sleep allowed for reflection, social interaction, and spiritual practice alongside biological restoration. producing a layered and adaptive nocturnal experience that enhanced both communal cohesion and individual well-being, and which reveals the sophisticated understanding medieval people had of human rhythms, energy, and attention. Sensory experience continued to play a central role during these middle watch periods. As the soft glow of embers and candlelight, the subtle movement of household members, the faint sounds of animals or distant neighbors, and the changes in room temperature all guided behavior, informing decisions about warmth, comfort, and engagement, and allowing brief awakenings to be productive, comforting, or spiritually meaningful without disrupting restorative rest, reflecting a remarkable alignment of physical, psychological, and social awareness that underpinned every aspect of nocturnal life, and which exemplified a slow, deliberate, and human-centered approach to time, space, and energy management. Spiritual practices remained interwoven throughout the night as whispered prayers, silent blessings, and the careful adjustment of protective talismans accompanied each awakening, reinforcing moral and cultural norms, offering reassurance, and providing a framework within which sleep could be both restorative and meaningful, a practice that connected the individual not only to family and household, but also to broader community, cultural, and spiritual structures, and which highlights the seamless integration of the sacred and the practical in medieval life, a rhythm in which even partial wakefulness was attended with care, attentiveness, and purpose. Social and educational elements were also present in these nocturnal hours, as parents, tutors, apprentices, or older siblings might quietly share instruction, recite stories, or impart moral lessons during awakenings, integrating reflection, cultural transmission, and communal observation into the ongoing flow of sleep, demonstrating that segmented sleep facilitated both rest and social cohesion, and that the quiet hours of the night were active sites of learning, memory, and socialization, rather than simply passive intervals of unconsciousness, a subtle but profound feature of medieval domestic life that underscores the holistic and adaptive nature of human behavior in this period. Material arrangements of the household: carefully prepared bedding, warm blankets, feather or straw mattresses, strategically placed pets, and the soft glow of hearth or candlelight supported these practices by providing comfort, warmth, and stability, allowing movement, reflection, and minor tasks to be carried out without disturbing others, and creating a nocturnal environment that was simultaneously functional, restorative, and psychologically comforting, a delicate balance of physical and mental attentiveness that sustained both individual health and communal harmony, and which demonstrates the deep, practical wisdom embedded in medieval domestic design and habit. Throughout these hours, the psychological benefits of segmented sleep became apparent, as individuals accustomed to waking and resting at intervals developed patience, attentiveness, and a subtle flexibility in behavior, responding calmly to minor disruptions, environmental cues, and household needs, creating a measured, deliberate, and soothing tempo that governed both night and day, and which allowed people to navigate labor, social interaction, and personal reflection with quiet assurance and gentle rhythm. As second sleep approached, households gradually returned to deeper, more continuous rest, guided by the cumulative practices of first sleep, nocturnal vigilance, domestic adjustment, spiritual mindfulness, and sensory awareness, creating a smooth, restorative transition into the final hours of night and the eventual dawn. A rhythm that was both calming and hypnotic, reinforcing physical restoration, emotional balance, and social cohesion, and providing a template of living in which human energy, attention, domestic care, and spiritual practice were harmoniously integrated into a slow, deliberate. In contemplating these nocturnal practices, modern viewers are invited to appreciate the subtle sophistication, patient observation, and gentle continuity of medieval life, a world in which sleep was neither rushed nor disconnected from culture, domesticity, or spirituality, but instead served as a central organizing force for daily rhythm, social cohesion, and personal well-being, offering timeless lessons in attentiveness, patience, and the quiet, hypnotic beauty of lives lived in deliberate harmony with both self and environment, and reminding us that the slow, measured, and thoughtfully integrated patterns of medieval existence remain deeply human, profoundly calming, and quietly mesmerizing, even across centuries. As the final hours of the night approached and households transitioned fully into second sleep, the delicate, deliberate, and highly structured nocturnal routines of medieval life reached their culmination, reflecting a culture in which segmented sleep, attentive, domestic care, spiritual mindfulness, and subtle social coordination were seamlessly integrated into the rhythm of life. For during these hours, every movement, gesture, and thought was informed by the cumulative habits established throughout the day and evening, creating a slow, soothing, and hypnotic tempo in which individuals navigated darkness with calm, patience, and awareness, adjusting straw mattresses, blankets, and pillows to maintain warmth and comfort, checking quietly on children, pets, and household members, performing minor tasks as needed, and whispering prayers or blessings to sustain both psychological reassurance and spiritual alignment. A pattern that exemplifies the profound understanding medieval people had of their own bodies, minds, environment, and social networks. Sensory cues, including the soft flicker of candlelight, the warm glow of embers, the faint rustle of straw under movement, and the distant sounds of animals or neighboring households, guided subtle actions, allowing awakenings and minor adjustments to occur without disturbing others and maintaining the restorative function of sleep, demonstrating a sophisticated integration of practical, cultural, and spiritual life, in which the nocturnal hours were both functional and deeply calming, and in which segmented sleep facilitated reflection, social bonding, cultural transmission, and emotional equilibrium alongside physical restoration. During these final periods of rest, social and educational elements continued quietly as parents, siblings, or apprentices might exchange stories, share guidance, or impart moral and practical instruction, blending learning, reflection, and communal awareness seamlessly into the nocturnal cycle, and reinforcing the intricate connection between household management, cultural transmission, and human attentiveness that characterized medieval life, revealing a continuity of purpose and habit that extended across both day and night, and which allowed individuals to navigate domestic, social, and spiritual responsibilities with measured calm and subtle efficiency. The physical environment of the household carefully arranged straw beds, blankets, feather pillows, strategically positioned pets, soft candlelight, and glowing hearth embers supported these practices, providing warmth, comfort, and sensory stability that allowed brief awakenings, reflective thought, and minor adjustments to occur naturally without disrupting others, highlighting the deep awareness medieval people had of the interplay between material environment, human behavior, and restorative sleep, a practical wisdom that cultivated calm, attentiveness, and resilience. Psychologically, the adaptation to polyphasic or segmented sleep fostered patience, flexibility, and subtle attentiveness, enabling individuals to respond calmly to minor disturbances. Household needs, or environmental cues, producing a measured, soothing, and hypnotic tempo that governed both night and day, influencing labor, domestic management, social interaction, and reflective practices, and creating a continuous, interconnected rhythm in which every pause, observation, and adjustment had significance, meaning, and function. As second sleep deepened and morning approached, the household gradually shifted from gentle nocturnal activity into longer, more restorative rest, preparing both body and mind for the coming day, completing the natural cycle of segmented sleep and reinforcing the slow, deliberate, and comforting patterns that had characterized the entire 24-hour rhythm, illustrating a harmonious alignment between human physiology, domestic care, spiritual mindfulness, and social cohesion that was central to medieval life, and which remains striking in its subtlety, elegance, and hypnotic, calming effect. In reflecting on these nocturnal routines and their integration with daily life, modern observers can appreciate the extraordinary attentiveness, patience, and subtle sophistication that defined medieval sleep habits. The slow, gentle, and deliberate pacing of domestic and spiritual life, and the profound human wisdom that allowed households to thrive in harmony with natural cycles, social responsibilities, and cultural expectations, creating a life that was quietly structured, soothingly hypnotic, and deeply human. As we conclude this exploration of medieval sleep, domestic rhythm, and segmented rest, we are reminded of the slow, deliberate, and deeply human patterns that structured existence in the past. And as we return to the modern world, we carry with us an appreciation for patience, attentiveness, and the subtle beauty of life carefully attuned to body, mind, community, and environment. A quiet invitation to embrace calm, measured living, and the gentle rhythms that make both history and human experience profoundly comforting. OUTRO paragraph. If you've enjoyed this slow, calming journey into the weird and wonderful sleep habits of medieval people, make sure to subscribe to The Boring Past for more soothing, hypnotic tales from history designed to relax, inform, and lull you into a peaceful state of reflection. And don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss another slow, mesmerizing story from the past. Thank you for joining us, and may your nights be as gentle and restorative as those of our medieval ancestors.